Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Tuesday afternoon. It's a fantastic Tuesday afternoon. The Eagles lost yesterday. Fantastic, just beautiful. As a Giants fan, I am just smiling. Saquon dropped the ball. You might be able to take Saquon off the Giants, but you can't take the Giants out of Saquon. And that's all I'm going to talk about with football. If you really want to hear the stuff about the game, there was a football podcast that literally just went live a few hours before my podcast just started. And there is also a sports podcast. There's Chip Shot Football Podcast. We have so many football podcasts. If you guys are interested in tuning into those, I highly recommend it. Our show hosts have differing opinions, a lot of different fans. We have a Patriots fan. We have a Eagles fan. We have a Giants fan. 2 Giants fans, actually, talking about football, and Seahawks fans. So many different perspectives that come in. And it's very interesting, so I definitely recommend you guys listening to those if you guys are interested in football. But since you guys clicked on the basketball, that means we are going to talk about basketball, and I love talking about football, so I highly recommend listening to the other podcasts or watching the other podcasts if you guys are interested in that sport. But in the first segment, we are going to talk about Michael Jordan apologizing. That's something that's almost unheard of, Michael Jordan apologizing. He usually stands on business. But he apologized to Scottie Pippen, and I'll explain what for in the first segment. In the second segment, I'm going to talk about JJ Redick and his plans for the Lakers. He seems to already have an idea, like how he wants to run the offense, and so I'm going to go ahead and just talk about that in the second segment. And then in the third and the fourth segment, I'm going to continue talking about players who I feel have the most to prove on their respective team. We also have a very, very special fifth segment. I was very, very tempted of making this fifth segment the first segment, but I already had the first segment prepped up. So this fifth segment is actually very, very good news. For all of you diehard basketball fans. I know, it was very surprising when I figured it out, but I'll reveal it after the fourth segment. Before I begin, however, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say, whether you guys have a burning take or a question about the game, something that you've been dying to say. We are all ears, and if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and just click Super Chat. You can use it's right below the chat box. You hit the $, and you can send in your comments or your donations in that way. Really helps the show. It makes it way more interactive between myself and you guys. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcsports.net, and then you can go ahead and send in your comments or donations that way. But either or works out and really helps the show. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Michael Jordan apologizing. This is something that I really did not expect Michael Jordan to do. He rarely ever apologizes about anything, really. You never really see him say, whenever he says something, he usually means it, and he stands on it. So the fact that he is apologizing to, let alone Scottie Pippen, who is right now his number one hater, then that really takes a good man to be able to do that. And I can give the props where props are needed, because it's kind of difficult to apologize to your, not really, it shouldn't be that difficult considering how that is his former teammate, but given all the drama and things like that have unfolded recently in their careers, it does take a real man to do that. So the article opens up saying, Michael Jordan apologized to Scottie Pippen for covering the 1994 Bulls-Knicks playoff game where Pippen refused to enter the final play. And, quote, he didn't say much other than to apologize. And so for those of you guys that need context and that didn't watch the NBA playoffs in 1994, me being one of them since I wasn't born in 1994, so the Bulls were just coming off their first three-peat. Michael Jordan, out of nowhere, suddenly decides to retire. And this is just instant. It is nobody expects this. There's speculation that there's speculation that he was secretly suspended for his gambling addiction. gambling addiction, alleged gambling addiction. I personally don't really think it's an addiction, but a lot of people can think whatever they want to think about Michael Jordan and his gambling. And really, it was the first time that the team didn't have Michael Jordan. So Scottie Pippen was the number one option for the first time on a team. And the team did very well. They only lost one more game than they did the previous year. They had more or less the exact same pieces that they previously had. The only big missing piece was Michael Jordan. But this 1994 Bulls team ran the triangle under Phil Jackson to perfection. And they were fantastic. They were just great. And until they got into the postseason. So they played the Knicks in the postseason. The Bulls and the Knicks, they were big rivals, and well, not really big rivals, I guess you could say, because 9 out of 10 times the Bulls would win in the series, but they would almost always match up against the Knicks. And this time they matched up in, I believe it was the first round. And the Knicks were sort of having, they sort of had the advantage throughout most of the series. There was this one game that came in where the Knicks were up by 1 point. And the Chicago Bulls ended up taking a timeout and drawing up a final play call and see if they can win and take the final shot. Now, the play call was drawn for Tony Kukoc. Scottie Pippen hated that. Scottie Pippen did not like that. He did not like the fact that the final play call wasn't a designed shot for him to take. Scottie Pippen wanted to be the man of that night, and he wanted to win the game for the Bulls. Once he found out that the play call wasn't meant for him, he sat out and he abandoned chose to not play the final minutes of the game when the team desperately needed him. It ended up backfiring on him, though, and he ended up looking really, really bad for doing this because Tony Kukoc ended up making the shot to win the game for the Bulls in the end, and I believe tie the series. So the fact that Scottie Pippen sat out when Tony Kukoc ended up making the shot that's just a bad teammate right there. Like, that's just, I understand, like, sure, the play should have been designed for Pippen. He is the number one option. And Pippen's argument was, if Jordan was on the team, there is absolutely zero doubt on who would get the ball in the final play. And they would have drawn up a play for Michael Jordan. And so he's mad that they did not draw up a play for him like how they did for Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan in The Last Dance decided to talk about this, and for some reason, even though it had nothing to do with Michael Jordan or his time with baseball, and obviously it rubbed Scottie the wrong way. And as this article continues going on, it says, Pippen didn't act like a leader in Game 3 of the Bulls-Knicks series as he refused to go into the game on the final play Phil Jackson drew up for Tony Kukoc. And in his memoir, Unguarded, Pippen wrote that he and Jordan talked about the 1.8 seconds game being in The Last Dance. And according to Pippen, Jordan, who had editorial control over the docuseries, apologized to him. I asked why he had allowed the 1.8 seconds game to make the final cut, Pippen wrote. He didn't say much other than to apologize and acknowledge that if it were him, he too would be upset. I didn't press any further. I knew it would do no good. After Pippen refused to enter Game 3, Jackson subbed in Pete Myers. Kukoc made the game-winning shot at the buzzer, and everyone on the Bulls was upset at Pippen, who cried in the locker room after Bill Cartwright called him out in front of the team. And a day after Game 3, Jordan called Jackson to talk about the incident, and MJ knew Pippen would never escape it. Pippen didn't help himself by saying in The Last Dance that he wouldn't change what he did in 1994 if he had the chance to do it all over again. Before Pippen said that, here's what Jordan said. It's always going to come back to haunt him at some point in some conversation, Jordan said. Pip knows better than that. And the reality is, Pippen should know better than that. And it's really like, you have to be like the leader of the team. And I totally understand that as the leader, you expect to take the final shot, but you still have to have faith in your team. You can be upset at the play calling after the game, but during the game, when it is desperately needed, you have to just roll with it. And like, I know it's going to hurt your pride, but you have to roll for it. Like, that's the whole point of winning championships for the Bulls. That was literally the whole point, and how Michael Jordan was able to win championships, because he sacrificed his pride and his scoring prowess for the better of the team. Because if you notice, when Phil Jackson became the coach, it wasn't like Michael Jordan was just having the ball 24/7 like how in the previous years when Doug was the coach. Like, it was completely different. The style of play was completely different, and it wasn't just get the ball to Michael, everybody get out of the way, and like all of these other things. Like, it wasn't. It was none of that. It was more so. What in the world? Okay, apparently my computer wants to restart, and I am not having that. So just give me 1 second so I can schedule a restart, so that way it doesn't interfere with the show. I apologize for that, for the inconvenience. And hold on just 1 second. There we go. Either way, that's all that I really had to talk about in this segment, because there's really nothing else that needs to be talked about. Scottie Pippen, like, he did something wrong, and not really wrong. He did something completely immature, something uncalled for, and Michael would have felt the same way. He apologized for it. It still made the final cut on The Last Dance. If you guys are interested in watching that episode, I believe it was episode 7 of the Last Dance documentary. So if you guys really want to hear what Michael Jordan had to say and you really want to see the entire situation unfold, go ahead and see that on Netflix. But we are out of time for this first segment, so now we will go ahead and go into the second segment, where I talk about JJ Redick and his plans for the Lakers offense and his ideas, his schemes, this, that, and the other. Everything that he said, like whether it be ranging from his podcast or whether it be ranging from interviews, we're going to go ahead and look at that and see exactly what's in stock for the Lakers next season. So I'll be right back after this short break. Please sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about JJ Redick and his coaching schemes, his coaching plans for this Lakers offense, Lakers defense, everything about it that he's been talking about. So we're going to put on our coaching caps for this one and talk a little bit about it. So before I begin, however, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, burning question, something that you just wanted to say about the game, we are all ears. And if you really wanted your question or comment to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use Super Chat. The link, well, not the link, excuse me. It is displayed. You just click the $ below the chat box, send in your comments or donations that way, and it will be guaranteed to be featured on the show. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and then you can send in your tips or comments, donations that way. And it really helps the show, makes it way more interactive between myself and you guys. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about JJ Redick, new coach for the Lakers, exactly what are his schemes, what's his plans for the team, how is he going to give the Lakers something different than what they previously had in previous years. So I'm looking at this article right now, and Redick seemed to be the Lakers' target throughout their process, and now they must hope that he can deliver as the team is desperate to win another title with LeBron James. So although Redick is an unknown head coach, like his first ever coaching job, Redick has spoken at length on broadcasts and in his podcast about the importance of three-point shooting and spacing, and he'll likely be implementing those concepts into his offensive scheme. So Redick said, I think it's a little more nuanced than just saying it's 5 out and every team is different. Again, in the NBA, you want to maximize spacing. That's what it comes down to. So for Denver, they want to score in the paint, so when they go 5 out, it's to get to the paint. And what they rely on is, let's say the ball goes here, now Jokic has it here. We're just going to cut. This could be a pin down. This could be a rip screen. That's Aaron Gordon going to the basket. I think when people say, oh, everybody's just spaced 5 out, and people think it's like this guy going to his bag every single time and jacking a 3. That's not what it is. And I believe that quote is sort of a reference to James Harden and the Houston Rockets and how they handled the 5-out situation. They were one of the first teams to implement the 5-out in a small ball type of lineup where everybody was spaced out and most of the paint, if not the entirety of the paint, was completely opened up. And one thing that I will say is that this concept of spacing, I am all for it. Like, I am a big fan of teams that run a 5-out set, teams that know how to run a 5-out set with all of the players around you. Like, in this league, you need spacing, and I feel like that is something that previous Lakers coaches just did not understand, especially Darvin Ham with his time trying to coach Westbrook and every other time before that, because the lineups that would be ran with the Lakers, there would be 2 or 3 people in the paint at some times. Most of the time it's 2, and it would obviously impact LeBron's success at the rim and everybody else's success at the rim, because now they have to worry about a defender inside. Not only do they have to worry about the defender guarding him, they also have to worry about the defender playing help defense because the spacing on the Lakers was so atrocious. And I felt like the spacing was one of the biggest problems with the Lakers offense that for some reason just never changed. Now that with JJ Redick being the coach and trying to implement that into the offense, I'm actually very, very excited to see how it's going to run. Now, I personally, it depends, how the 5-out is run. Because if you are relying on just one player or just 2 players, like JJ Redick said, to get in their bag and chuck up a 3 or take a shot, I don't think that's winning basketball. But if you implement that spacing and create plays for other players to run, like how the Denver Nuggets do with Aaron Gordon on a back door, which is very, very difficult to guard, I feel like that when you implement that into your offense, you unlock so many things. And that's one of the more underrated things about 5-out. It's just the amount of open looks that you're actually able to get. It's very staggering because a lot of people in the NBA, they try to put more effort on offense. Therefore, the effort on defense is going to be a little bit less because, they're trying to save their energy on offense, meaning that the rotations aren't going to be there every single time or as many times as you expect, leading to so many open looks. People forget just how many open shots the Houston Rockets in 2020 were actually able to get while they were rolling with Russell Westbrook and James Harden. That offensive style of play opens up a lot of things. It's just the big problem with it is when you rely on 1 or 2 players a little bit too much when running that offensive style. And I feel like JJ completely understands that and would implement several other things into the offense if they do end up running a 5-out. I'm really excited to see how this will play out if he does implement this into the lineup, because LeBron and his IQ and the way that he plays the game and the amount of attention that he brings to the painted area, it's only going to drastically improve his already amazing playmaking. Not to mention how many open looks LeBron is actually going to be able to get at the basket now that he only has to worry about one defender, the defender that's in front of him. And ain't nobody can guard LeBron. Let's be real. Nobody can guard LeBron. It's really difficult to guard LeBron, especially when he has a head full of steam running to the basket. Very, very difficult to stop. And it's not like obviously it's not like that's the only nuance in his game. He can go into the post and do exactly what Jokic is doing in the post. Like, we see Jokic post up, and when he's posted up, he puts the ball really high in the sky and he looks around and he surveys the floor. Eventually, somebody is going to be open, whether it be Aaron Gordon coming in off of a cut, he can lob it up. But when Aaron Gordon comes on the cut, there's also a chance that the corner defender is going to come down and stop him from cutting, which enables Jokic to make that pass into the corner. That is something that LeBron can easily do, and something that LeBron has been doing for years, reading the defense before the defense actually reacts. And it could fit very, very well. So with how the article continues, I'm just going to continue. There is a misconception that 5-out offense exclusively means shooting threes, but as Redick points out, it's much more than that, and to that I 100% agree. When Russell Westbrook and James Harden were running the 5-out, Russell Westbrook's three-point attempts were less than 1, meaning that the only shots that Russell Westbrook was even attempting was inside the arc, and a majority of those shots were actually inside the paint, where he completely excels at. And because of that, spacing is what enabled him to be able to get to the paint so easily. Because of that, defenses have tried to respond to that sort of style by putting the center on Russell Westbrook, since Russell Westbrook isn't that much of a shooter. And to that, I'm saying that's an open shot that any other player can probably hit. So it's going to be much more difficult to be able to guard that if it was somebody else maybe running it. And even then, when Russ was running that 5-out, he was averaging 34 points per game, which is incredible for, like, at least, in the span when PJ Tucker was the center and not Clint Capella. So I really think that this offensive style has huge potential for the Lakers and this lineup, and they definitely need a refresh and a reset button on how they operate in the spacing department, because their spacing for several years has been very, very bad and very inconsistent. And it's like, what are you doing? That's usually what I say whenever I watch the Lakers. I'm like, why is there so many people in the paint? Space out. It was a big problem when Westbrook was on the team, and part of the reason why the Westbrook situation didn't work. The other part of it was because Westbrook just wasn't playing as well as he should. But half of the game was essentially just the lineups not working for him. And one person who believes JJ Redick will succeed in his new role as the coach with the Lakers is actually Coach K. And he coached Redick in college, and the two have remained close ever since. So the fact that Coach K really thinks that he's going to succeed with the Lakers should say a lot, because Coach K is like a living legend in the basketball world. Not only does he coach one of the best not only has he coached one of the best college programs in the history of college programs, but he also coached the Redeem team for the Olympics. It's absolutely amazing. So, and before I end off this segment, there is somebody in the chat, Anthony Manzano. What's up? So I'm just going to go ahead and read off this question. There was an article recently written by someone on Bleacher Report talking about who would make sense to trade for Jimmy Butler from Miami, which I don't think happens. And one of the favorites were the Lakers, but do you think they really have enough young players to draft picks for Jimmy Butler? No, they do not. This happens every single time with the Lakers. It's a cycle that starts from the beginning of the free agency all the way up to the trade deadline. They always think that they have enough to get this. They always want to get that, but it never, ever happens. There were reports that the Lakers were going to get Kyrie. There were reports that they were going to get Kawhi. There were reports that they were going to get all of these players, and none of that happened. This is just a Lakers cycle. No, Jimmy Butler's not going to the Lakers. He has a better chance of going to Golden State than he does going to the Lakers. So I honestly think that's complete blasphemy. And They do not have enough picks for Jimmy Butler. They don't even have enough pieces to want to trade Jimmy Butler. And I don't even think Miami is going to want to even consider that offer. So that's all that I have on that, though, and that's all that I have on this segment. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk about players on each team that have the most to prove. I started this segment yesterday, and we went up to, I believe it was the Detroit Pistons. So now we're going to move on with the list, and I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be listing the players that have the most to prove on each and every single one of the NBA teams that are currently available now. And I say currently because there might be some more NBA teams coming around. There's an expansion being talked about, so we don't know. Maybe there's going to be a new franchise in the NBA soon, maybe a new division, who knows. But aside from that, we left off with the Detroit Pistons, I believe, and I said that the Detroit Pistons, they needed to work on absolutely everyone, and so I'm not really going to talk about the Pistons. If you guys are interested in what I had to say about the Pistons, you can watch the previous episode on the YouTube channel, or you can listen to the previous podcast where I talk about it in the final segment. So, since we left off with Detroit, we're moving on to Golden State now. And the player with the most to prove on Golden State is one and only Jonathan Kuminga. Now, Jonathan Kuminga, he already proved Steve Kerr wrong for benching him and not playing him a lot in these several games. And in the games where he started to play and Steve Kerr actually gave him legitimate minutes, he was able to capitalize on those minutes and actually impact the Warriors in a very positive way. Now he has to follow through with that this season as well. Given that Klay Thompson is no longer an option on the Golden State Warriors, that leaves Jonathan Kuminga as the most likely second option for the team. Now he has to deliver on what he said, and now he has to deliver on his stance on being a top option for the team. And he's shown several flashes of being a number 2 option and being a star on the Golden State Warriors. He was the number 7 pick in 2021 and has only averaged 21 minutes across 211 career games played, and that's 74 starts. So out of the 211 games that he played, he was only starting in 74 of them. So now he has to sort of grow into that role as a starter. His explosive athleticism jumps off the screen, and his hints of self-creation really let the imagination run wild. He can create a shot for himself very effectively. And it wouldn't normally be too worrisome for a 21-year-old to actually step up at this point in their career, yet it matters only for a few reasons. The Golden States, they hope that they can sort of maximize that potential that Jonathan Kuminga has right now for this season, because Steph Curry really, really needs a co-star. And he already has the pick and roll buddy with Draymond Green, but Draymond Green isn't much of an offensive talent. or not as much of an offensive talent as he used to be. Therefore, he needs more offense and they need more scoring. I understand defense is incredibly valuable. It's half the game, but you also have to put the ball in the basket. And the Warriors, they aren't currently really prepared to give Jonathan Kuminga that max contract. This could be the year that ultimately propels them into finally doing so and solidifying him as a second option for the Golden State Warriors. So, that's all I have to say. Let me know in the comments if you think there's someone else on the Warriors that has a lot more to prove. Now, the next team is the Houston Rockets, and the player that has the most to prove there is Jalen Green. Now, Jalen Green, he had a ridiculous stretch during the second half of the season where he averaged 30 points on 50, 45, and 74% shooting, along with 6 rebounds and 4 assists during the 11-game winning streak that they had and he was even named the Western Conference Player of the Week in that week. He absolutely balled out of his mind. Like, before that stretch of games, I literally just thought that he was an inefficient shot chucker. But with that performance, he could legitimately be the team's best scorer. Not saying he could be the number one option, but he could be the team's best scorer. And now this season, he has to capitalize on that 30 points per game production and do it again. This time for the entirety of the season and not have to worry about all the inconsistencies that come along with it. He needs to be a lot more consistent. And that final stretch, a lot of people are going to hold that to him, that final stretch of games. And they've been hoping to see that he was a number 2 pick in 2021, and they were hoping that he would play somewhere near this, and he finally did. And it's obviously, this is going to bring up a lot of confusion around the Houston Rockets with who's going to be our number 1 option, Sengun or Jalen Green? Who are we going to build around? It is going to bring up a lot of questions like that. But he is clearly capable of delivering on a lot of important shots, and he was unreal. There were times where he was shooting a 3 and he would just look back. He would just walk back on defense yeah, that's going in. It was insane the way that he was playing. And, for a scoring specialist, however, his career, he's averaged 42% from the field, 33% from 3, and 79% from the free throw line. So, not all that efficient. But towards the final stretch, he was very, very efficient. And he needs to sort of maintain that efficiency and maintain that rhythm throughout a lot of this Houston Rockets season. And there could be a chance that they make the postseason if he does that. So definitely he does have a lot to prove to a lot of the fans that he's not just an inefficient shot chucker and he can be a good option for the team. Next player on this list is for the Pacers, and it's Benedict Mathurin. So the Pacers, they used the 2023 and 2024 season as a springboard, and their second-year swingman Benedict Mathurin failed to do the same, failed to keep up with the Pacers, despite showing a few improvements, like upping his shooting rates and his assist rates while trimming down his turnovers. He sort of lost his starting spot and wound up averaging fewer minutes than he had in his rookie campaign. So, a right shoulder injury sidelined him for a very long time in March, meaning that he was simply a spectator during the run in the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Pacers also seemingly found better fits in the starting lineup with Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Naismith. So, Mathurin, being the number 6 pick in the 2022 draft, is still only 22 years old, and the team is relatively young. So now he has to sort of find his footing on the team and prove to everybody that he actually belongs in the roster and in the rotation and on this fast-paced offensive team. Because that injury, we're going to have to see exactly whether or not he's going to come back stronger or he's going to come back worse than after that injury. Next player on this list is for the Los Angeles Clippers, and it goes to James Harden. Obviously, everybody knows that James Harden, at least right now, is nowhere near the same player that he was on Houston. That being said, that doesn't mean that there isn't value to James Harden in his game. He's still a very valuable playmaker that the Clippers utilized phenomenally during a couple of stretches. But towards the end of the season, the Clippers sort of fell off, and James Harden's play in turn also fell off, especially in the postseason. And in my opinion, James Harden, he's always, on every team that he's been on, he's always had the most to prove, because in every single season, I feel like he has to prove that he can actually legitimately play in the postseason. It's just every single season in the postseason, there is always that one game or that one series or that one stretch of play where he just sells and he just loses the series for his team. It happens every single season. He is one of the worst playoff performers that the NBA has. It happens all the time. And he needs to prove that he can finally take that final step and legitimately make it to the finals. And between the fact that Paul George left the team now means that James Harden is undoubtedly the second option behind Kawhi Leonard. And because it's behind Kawhi Leonard, 9 times out of 10, he's going to have to be the first option for the team because Kawhi Leonard might get injured, especially in the postseason. So he really has to prove himself. He needs to prove himself in that postseason. And he also, maybe he can prove to everyone that he still has the scoring in his veins, that he can still score the basketball very, very well. He is a fraction of the player that he used to be on Houston. And part of that might be because he doesn't have the same explosiveness. Part of that could be he's not as efficient as he was on Houston, and this, that, and the other. Still, he needs to improve, and he needs to step up. Now, he's 35 years old, so it's a possibility that he's simply just, declining. And this season could determine whether or not he's actually on the decline or whether or not he is still good enough to play at a high level, at the high level that we expect James Harden to play. And in my opinion, all has to come from the postseason. Now, before I go into the break, I am going to talk about the other Los Angeles team, and the player with the most to prove is going to be Austin Reeves. I was really, really close to putting D'Angelo Russell on there instead because D'Lo just played horrifically in the postseason, but I decided not to and decided to give it to Austin Reeves because Austin Reeves is most likely going to be the third option for the team. And the issue was the Lakers were kind of banking on a phenomenal season from him. And his stretch run surge during the previous campaign had generated plenty of rising star buzz because a lot of people were expecting Austin Reeves to be a rising star. And his production, 15 points per game, 5 assists on 32 minutes, he looked more like a very solid role player than a star in the making, which, again, is fine in theory, but potentially torpedoes any hopes of title dreams becoming a reality. So basically what the article is saying is that he needs to sort of step up and be that third option, that undoubted third option on the team, and actually show off some star power in order for the Lakers to legitimately compete. And the Lakers, they were pretty mid this season, and by pretty mid, I mean they were rather mediocre, and it's a majority of the reason was because the rest of the roster just couldn't really keep up with LeBron and Anthony Davis. I'm sorry to say this, but that roster was incredibly weak. And D'Lo, yes, he could keep up with the scoring and things like that, but once the playoffs came, he was nowhere to be found. Austin Reeves needs to be that third option and that consistent third option that the Lakers need. And with that being said, I'm going to end off the third segment right there, but I will continue on with this list into the fourth segment, so I'll just go into a short break for the ads. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be continuing on with this list of players that have the most to prove. And this is probably going to go on for a little bit longer than the previous segment, just because I want to get through a majority of the players on this list, as well as the fact that the fifth segment is probably going to be a much shorter segment than usually. So, because the breaking news, it's really just breaking news in the fifth segment. Again, I wanted to make the fifth segment the first segment, but I already had the first segment planned out, so I apologize for that. But without further ado, let's continue on with this list. So we are on the Memphis Grizzlies, and the player with the most to prove is Ja Morant, without a doubt. Ja Morant came off of an injury, so we have no idea if he's going to be the same player that he used to be. He didn't play all of last season. Again, no idea if he's going to be the player that he used to be. On top of that, we also have to see if Ja Morant can stay away from those off-the-court problems, massive air quotes on off-the-court problems, and sort of eliminate that from his season and eliminate the distractions and just play basketball. Because that was, in my opinion, the biggest reason for Memphis losing to the Lakers, aside from the fact that the Lakers just played so much better than Memphis and their experience. Because the Memphis Grizzlies, most of the time they have to worry about Ja Morant going live and doing something incredibly ignorant. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to slander or anything, but what was being done on those lives was ignorant, and there's really no other word other than that. And you have to, as a basketball player, and with kids watching you, you have to eliminate those off the court problems. You just have to, as an athlete, you have to be better than that. And this is going to be the season that Ja Morant is going to have to prove to everybody that he is better than that and that he can avoid all of those problems off the court, because he is a fantastic player when he's playing. It's just that he gets himself into some trouble, unnecessary trouble for the team, and it ultimately hurts him because, again, he opened up the season on a 25-game suspension, and then he got hurt. They need him. The Memphis Grizzlies clearly need Ja Morant to stay active and stay on the team if they want success. And the article continues going on saying a healthy Ja Morant is the proverbial unstoppable object. Over the past 3 seasons, he's been per game supplier of 26 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. Those are, at the very least, down ballot MVP numbers. His issue, of course, has been his availability, which is what I just said. And he needs to sort of prove to Memphis that he can legitimately play without any sort of off-the-court issues, whether it be injuries, whether it be what he does with his friends on Instagram Live, or what he allegedly does with his friends on Instagram Live, whatever you guys want to call it. I'm not going to get into that little issue that went on in the offseason, because I'm sure everybody knows exactly what happened. And he needs to prove that he can be better. It's that simple. He needs to prove that he can mature and he can be better. Clearly, that's all that needs to happen. It's all down to him for that happening as well. It's nothing that the coaches can fix. It's nothing that the team can fix. It's all going to be down to him, which is why I feel he has the most to prove of everybody on the entire Memphis Grizzlies. Now, next player on this list plays for the Miami Heat, and that is going to be Tyler Hero. Now, Tyler Hero, he recently signed the Heat, they threw $130 million his way before even seeing how he'd be able to handle the starting position. And he needs to capitalize on that, because for a long time, since he was drafted, a lot of people really thought that Tyler Hero was going to be that guy for the Miami Heat, and he was going to be a very solid option for the team and a valuable option for the team, especially in the bubble when he was going up against LeBron and hitting very, very important shots. Everyone is sort of expecting Tyler Hero to finally take that final step and be one of the better players on the Miami Heat. But it's sort of like he's a bit mediocre. Again, he comes off the bench, so maybe that hinders his production just a little bit. But he needs to sort of blossom into that role as a starter and a very solid option on the starting lineup. Now, he averaged at least 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists in each of the past 3 seasons. And he hasn't really taken off as a playmaker or rocketed that much into, as an elite shooter, I guess you could say. And there's obviously, it's a lot of nitpicking when criticizing his offensive production, But that's also sort of like you have to nitpick with his offensive production because he is a liability on the defensive side of the ball. So if he's not doing the best that he can on offense, you're only causing problems for your team on the defense, which, again, is half of the game. Now, despite reaching at least the Eastern Conference Finals in 3 of the past 5 seasons, the Heat are barely mentioned among the conference's top teams. They're usually underdogs when they make it into these situations. And if Tyler Hero can blossom into that player and play alongside Jimmy Butler rather well, then there could be a chance that the Miami Heat actually get put in those conversations with the Boston Celtics, with the New York Knicks, with the Philadelphia 76ers as being one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Because aside from those 3, no one expects any other team to make it out of the Eastern Conference. It's either the Celtics, the Knicks, or the Sixers, depending on the matchups going into the playoffs. And it's really only those 3 teams. So Miami, the fact that they're able to actually make it farther than majority of those teams is impressive in of itself, but most of the time it's with underdogs. They have to, as underdogs, they have to have a season where they're legitimately the favorite. And I think the key to that is Tyler Hero. He has to prove that he is worth that $130 million contract, So, next player on this list is Chris Middleton for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he didn't really play all that great for the majority of the regular season. He's sort of fallen off since the Bucks won that championship back in 2021. And Damian Lillard being added to the roster obviously sort of hinders his production since he's no longer going to be the second option on the team, And obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo being in his prime is going to affect both of their productions because Giannis is just Giannis, a Greek freak, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best player in the NBA right now, aside from Jokic, because it's marginal. It's like I got Jokic here, and then right there is Giannis. It is so close. And obviously, with the franchise, with Giannis at its centerpiece, he needs the help. He needs other players. And during the championship run that the Bucks had, Chris Middleton was the closer for the team, and he was a very, very reliable piece when the team needed him to be. And because of that, because they sort of lost that from him, I feel like they've sort of taken a step back, no pun intended, and in their offensive production. He needs to be that player that he used to be. And he's shown flashes of being that player in the postseason. When Damian Lillard and Giannis ended up going down with an injury, the Bucks ended up winning. Now, Chris Middleton might not have played all that well in the series. I'm actually going to check exactly what Chris Middleton averaged in that playoff series. Hold on just 1 second before I'll give you guys the numbers real quick. Hold on. Chris Middleton's game log all the way down. Recent playoffs. Here we go. So for the playoff series, he averaged 24 points per game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 48% from the field, 35% from 3. That is, and 90% from the free throw line. That is fantastic. He needs to do that when Giannis and Dame are playing, though. And once he does that, I feel like that's when they're going to have exactly the production that they need from him. And they blew out the Pacers in Game 5 with Middleton dropping 29 points and 12 rebounds. Fantastic game coming in from him. He has to show that he can do that again. And he also was able to score 42 points in a Game 3 loss I believe it was in Indiana. And that was unfortunate that he ended up losing. He dropped 42 points and ended up getting 10 rebounds. So he is a very talented player. He just needs to prove that he can display that talent while he's playing with Dame and while he's playing with Giannis. He needs to have that value. And on top of that, he is 33 years old, so he's not getting any younger. And over the past 2 campaigns combined, he's also had surgery on both ankles this offseason. Injuries are another thing that's been plaguing the Milwaukee Bucks. And he needs to be available for this team for a majority of the season. Same with Giannis, same with Dame. But I feel like I was really close to putting Dame on this aside from Chris Middleton. But I'm going to give Dame the benefit of the doubt for last season because of a couple of reasons. One, it was his first time on a completely new team. There's obviously going to be some issues there. There's going to be some chemistry issues. You're not going to immediately get on a team and win a championship unless you're Kevin Durant joining the 73-9 Warriors. And two, Damian Lillard previously said that he knows that he was out of shape in the offseason because he did not want to get injured. He was not working out or doing anything in the offseason because he was afraid of getting injured, and that would affect his trade value and people wanting to trade him. And because of that, I didn't want to put Dame on this list over somebody like Chris Middleton, who has already played for the franchise, has already won a championship for the franchise, but is now sort of hindering the franchise a little bit because of his inconsistencies. And that's the reason why I have Chris Middleton here instead of Damian Lillard, for any of you guys who are curious. And I do have time for one more player, so I might as well go ahead and list him off. And then the next player is on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that is going to be Jaden McDaniels. Now, Jaden McDaniels, he played pretty well in a majority of the postseason. He was one of the league's best 3-and-D wings, and when his three balls are falling, that's exactly who he is. However, defense is the only constant that he has. Offense remains a little bit of a mystery for him, and he shot below 34% from three in 2 of the past 3 seasons in the NBA. So if he is able to sort of harness that three-point shooting and legitimately become a 3-and-D threat for the Timberwolves, it could be a serious, serious problem. As Anthony Edwards has said, he's the X factor of the team. I think everybody knows that. That is what Anthony Edwards said. That's a quote. And this is what he told reporters in May. Quote, "When he plays well, we win. I don't know the percentages, but I feel like when Jaden plays well, can't nobody beat us." End quote from Anthony Edwards. And that goes to show you that, like, just the value that he has for the team and the importance of his play and the importance of his style to the winning formula that the Timberwolves have. The Timberwolves, they are an elite defensive team, but their offense is usually hit or miss. In the playoffs, when they went up against the Mavs, it was a miss. But when they went up against other teams, it was a hit. So it's like they're rather inconsistent. They have to sort of get rid of that inconsistencies. Now, you can blame it a lot on Karl Anthony Towns for not being a good playoff performer. You could also blame it on Anthony Edwards for crumbling under the pressure against the Dallas Mavericks. However, everybody's at fault for losing because it is a team sport. And him being the X factor, like according to Anthony Edwards, means that he has a lot to prove to these fans as well as Anthony Edwards. And I feel like if there's anybody on the team that has a lot to prove, it's Jaden McDaniels. So that's all I have for this 4th segment. So now we are going to go ahead and go into the 5th segment where I talk about the possibility of Seattle returning as an NBA franchise. Yes, Seattle could make a return, and I'm going to explain why after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be talking about the possibility of Seattle making a comeback. And to that, I say yes, yes, yes. Seattle deserves an NBA franchise. They deserve to keep their franchise. And I'll explain why there's a chance that they could return. So, as we know, in previous years, when the Seattle Supersonics were a thing, when Kevin Durant was drafted there, immediately after, the Seattle Supersonics ended up relocating and changing the name of their franchise to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they moved to OKC, leaving Seattle in the dust. And it left a lot of people in Seattle rather bitter because there's a lot of basketball fans in Seattle. And everybody, since Seattle has been gone, they've all been praying and they've all been hoping and they've all been wanting a Seattle team there and the Seattle Supersonics to return for the longest time. It's just, for some reason, that's never happened. Now, with the NBA talking about expanding and possibly introducing another division or a new division in the NBA and trying to expand to other teams and make other teams, there's a chance that Seattle could have a franchise in the NBA once again. And that left a lot of fans very excited. Like, the number one city that wants an expansion team there is Seattle. The other one is, Las Vegas and several other places. I personally don't agree with the Las Vegas one. I would much rather Seattle. But it's still promising. And what makes it even more promising is that I just received news from, according to Sportsbet Expert, saying that the Thunder are willing to give the Seattle Supersonics their history back if the NBA grants Seattle an NBA team. And to that, I say yes. Fantastic. That's how it's supposed to be. They can reclaim their history, they can reclaim all the players that they've had, and they can come back into the league as if nothing has happened and they weren't gone and they didn't take a hiatus for a couple of years. And I am very, very excited for the expansions if they can get this approved. I really, really hope that they can get this approved and that the NBA is going to negotiate and be willing to talk about expanding NBA teams and maybe bring an expansion team over to Seattle. And really, OKC, obviously OKC, it's not a bad franchise. They're doing fantastic. Now, the question that I have is, I don't know if the entire Thunder franchise was going to relocate back to Seattle and Shai is going to play on Seattle, or if they're just going to make a completely new, they're just going to completely erase the OKC history from Seattle and give it back to Seattle, and Seattle just makes a new team. I have no idea how it's going to work. I'm actually going to go on my phone and see if that's going to work, because I literally, this is breaking news that I found out before I even started this podcast. Therefore, I'm relatively new on this topic, and I have no idea exactly what the plan would be if they were to grant Seattle an NBA team and bring them back. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a look and see exactly what the plan would be. OKC willing to give Seattle its history. So I'm just going to see if anybody has already talked about it before. And according to the rest of the article, according to this article, it's saying Seattle Supersonics relocation to OKC ranks amongst the messiest sports relocation in the very messy history of sports relocations. However, the Supersonics were to come back as an expansion team, it appears at least one of the move's wrongs would be righted. The Thunder would transfer its pre-relocation history to a hypothetical future Seattle expansion team, according to a Tuesday morning report from ESPN's Tim Bontemps, Kevin Pelton, and Brian Windhorst. So, sources said if a team was to return to Seattle, the Thunder would cede the Seattle's history back to the Supersonics, just as the NBA's Charlotte Hornets reclaimed the Charlotte-era history of the New Orleans Pelicans when Charlotte switched from being the Bobcats to the Hornets in 2014, the three insiders wrote. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver recently stated the league would discuss expansion at some point this season. So it seems that really what's going to happen is just the history is being moved from OKC right back to Seattle. So everything that OKC, like the Oklahoma City Thunder team, has made and has produced is going to belong to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and everything that the Seattle Supersonics have produced is going to belong to the Seattle Supersonics. I think that's what's going to be done, meaning that Westbrook's history on OKC, James Harden's history on OKC, Shai Gilgeous' history on OKC, and the roster spot OKC itself, excuse me, is going to stay on OKC. But the history that they had, drafting Kevin Durant, Sean Kemp, having Gary Payton, all of that is going to be in Seattle. So I think that's sort of what the change is going to be. To that, I say yes, and honestly, I really, really hope that Seattle becomes the first team to get an expansion. So with that, we are out of time for this segment. That's all I have for the show. And not only that, I also have to get ready for class. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we'd love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question. We are all ears, and if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use the super chat. Hit the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your message. It's guaranteed to get featured on the show. Great way to support our channel. Super chat, if it's not really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments or donations that way. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all that I have for you today on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as I said before in the beginning, go ahead and tune into the other sports podcast and the football podcast. There's one coming up right now, actually, where TJ, the host of the sports podcast, is going to talk about football and about the game that happened previously and how the Eagles completely choked away the game because Saquon Barkley can't catch a football. So for any of you guys who are interested in listening to that, I recommend to tune into all of the football podcasts. And that's all that I have for you today. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.